This is EPMK. What if we could bridge gaps in opportunity throughout the world? Today, I'm going to show you a tool that is exemplary in how we may be able to do so. Hi there, my name is Calvin James, and I am a staff writer and editor for El Paisano Media, along with being a student concurrently at both Rio Hondo College and Saddleback College. On today's podcast, I want to talk to you about sim racing. Sim racing is short for simulation racing and is essentially a far more advanced version of auto racing video games. It is a highly immersive digital form of motorsport that seeks to accurately replicate real-world racing on real tracks. Perhaps you may have wanted more when you were a kid, just like me, and you touched your first car video game, whether that was Forza or a game like even Real Racing 3. A controller or phone never really brought justice to the freedom that driving a car brings. For someone like me, I always wanted to see what a game would feel like with wheels and pedals, just like a car. But unlike these arcade games, sim racing features realistic physics engines that model tire grip, weight transfer, fuel usage, and even go as far to model things like aerodynamics, weather conditions, and track evolution. They really do model everything and far more than I can mention, as racing is a very complicated representation of physics in both real life and in simulation racing. And so now that I've given you a little background on what sim racing is, I want to give you a little background on my introduction to motorsports and how I came into contact with such a thing. And so, as I said, my name is Calvin. I grew up in Colorado. I was very fortunate to grow up in the mountains of Colorado. But that also meant that I was fortunate enough to see all of the road conditions that one can see in their life. And so this meant I was seeing things like snow, slush, rain, and anything else in between. And even a sunny day in Colorado calls for safe driving, as it does anywhere. But my dad was very into cars growing up, and so was I. And so my introduction to racing was in 2007. My dad flew me out to see family, and we went to my first NASCAR race at Sonoma Raceway. And for those who don't know, Sonoma Raceway is in Northern California, and it is a very hilly, very windy road course, which means they turn left and right. And NASCAR goes there every year. And for those that don't know, NASCAR is primarily an oval-based series. So whenever they go to a road course, it's very special. And these are cars that aren't necessarily meant to turn right and left. And so it makes the racing phenomenal. And so I'll always remember that day in 2007. Kyle Busch, a notorious driver within NASCAR, drove his yellow M&M's Toyota Camry, I believe it was, to victory that day, which was crazy because that earlier that year he had broken his leg, I believe, and so he was on a tear after he got back in the car. And who would come to be my favorite driver, Jeff Gordon, finished third. And this was my introduction to racing. And so I'd come to learn how great of a driver Jeff Gordon was, how good he was at Sonoma, and far more about the sport. But this was really my introduction to motorsport and how I got so deeply into NASCAR first. And also, it being a road course, this gave me the basis for understanding that racing across the board, in almost all of its forms, if not all, is awesome. It is one of the coolest sports ever. You know, I grew up a Broncos fan, and the NFL is great. I'm not going to talk anything bad about other sports, but racing is the best thing on the planet. It cannot be beat. And so for that same reason, I was also very into cars, and that may have played into this, but I've always been into cars. There's a level of freedom there, and there's a level of safety. I was a mountain bike racer in high school, and this is fun knowledge just because of the fact that bikes have 2 tires and cars have 4. So I always felt safe in a car. Can't tip over. You're not going to wash a front wheel and tip over. I always felt essentially safe so long as you understood the physics of it all. And so I actually learned how to drive a car in a very unconventional manner. And to any legal experts listening to this, I do know that this was far enough ago that this does not matter. But when I was 11, my dad first taught me how to drive a car in a snowy parking lot. And I'll always remember it. It had snowed about a foot that night. And so my dad took me out like we would normally go. My dad was just a fan of sliding around in the snow, whether that be in snowy parking lots. My whole life, I will always remember one of the first cars he had was an Audi S4000, I believe it was, and we had my cousin in the car, and we were showing her around when I was around 6 or 7. And my dad pulled up to a 4-way stop and did a sweet donut and peeled out. So that was my introduction to driving with my dad. He had to drive for work. He was a very good driver. He grew up in California. We did a lot of road tripping. And my dad just knew a lot about cars. And so that being said, it was that snowy night in 2011, and I was in the driver's seat learning how to drive. And I had already picked up on all of the ways that he was drifting a car, how he was being a good driver, what it meant to lose traction. Maybe I didn't have the actual terminology to define these things, but the physics of it all really made sense to me. And how you get a car sideways, how you maintain a drift, what a donut is versus a drift. And we can get into that in a later podcast, but basically the funny part about the story is I'm in the driver's seat and my dad's in the passenger seat, and a cop pulls up on us, and it's a woman, and she comes over to my dad's side of the car, thankfully. And take in mind, I'm only 11 at the time, so I'm barely 5 feet tall, I think. And my dad was kind of blocking me, and so she couldn't quite see me, and she just said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" My dad, I'm teaching my son how to handle snowy conditions out on the road. And she gave a good nod. She was understanding. Just don't damage private property. You'll have to pay for it if you do. And you guys have a good night. And she left us be. Small town in Colorado, I guess. I am very lucky. And so, that being said, that was my introduction to driving a car. And flash forward maybe 10 years, I had gotten very into bike racing and had a traumatic accident right before college. Tried to get through college. Never really worked out for me. And I had been working different jobs and whatnot, but I had always developed and maintained this love of racing, and being a race fan, I was just an avid NASCAR fan. And with no insult to anyone who's religious, Sundays were my church. I would sit down and watch every NASCAR race from start to finish. And sometimes I'd tune into some IndyCar racing or to some Formula One, because as I said, I like racing, or even some endurance racing. And I knew about rally racing and everything else, but NASCAR was everything to me. And growing up a Jeff Gordon fan, for those that don't know, Jeff Gordon was one of the best drivers of all time to touch any race car ever, well respected among many forms of different motorsport. Actually, he jumped into a Formula One car, for those that don't know, and traded seats with, I believe it was Juan Pablo Montoya, and he set down such respectable lap times that the paddock of F1 was kind of shocked. And so Jeff was just great, and I'll always remember the 2014 NASCAR season, because the cars that year, for those that don't know, NASCAR is basically stock car racing, so they have to take the model of a car, and there's three competing series, there's three competing manufacturers. It's Toyota, Chevrolet, and Ford, and they have to take one of their model cars. And at the time too, maybe not in 2014, I think they had dropped out by then, but there's also Dodge. And so they have to take one of their model cars, be it a Camry or a Mustang or a Camaro like they are now. Back then it was the Chevy Malibu, I believe, or the Chevrolet SS. Can't remember. Man, talk about a car I want. Side note, Chevrolet SS, sweet car. But that being said, 2014 was definitely my favorite season of NASCAR ever and still stands to be. The cars had 1,000 horsepower. It was before they had modernized the cars, so they still didn't have independent rear suspension. And given the rules of that year, they had a lot of downforce in the cars. They were doing insane numbers. At this 2 mile track in Michigan, they were touching they think they were touching 210. And their average pole laps were just insane that year. The cars were rapid. It was just great racing. And Jeff Gordon, being at the end of his career at that point, was having a phenomenal year. He won 4 races. He would have won the championship if NASCAR hadn't implemented their, in my opinion, very dumb playoff racing. And yeah, that's for a whole nother podcast, a whole nother article. But that being said, the racing that year was just off the charts. And I really would put that down as the year that I fell for racing. I watched all the races. I was such an avid Jeff Gordon fan. I'd jump up and down when he win. But that was the year that, that racing really got to me. I was just angry that Jeff Gordon didn't win. And to this day, I still hate Brad Keselowski. If you're listening, you're a terrible driver, by the way. There's a reason that you can't win without being dirty. And there's a reason you spin out on every road course. And give me your seat, I'll beat you any day. But this is getting me very sidetracked. And so, as I said, I was also into car games. And so all my friends would play games like Destiny in high school and Call of Duty. And I just was like, I don't really care. I related far more to a game like Forza because as a biker and as a person who enjoyed the freedoms of a car, it gave me so much freedom and my ability to maneuver. And so with that, I encountered sim racing. I had just heard about it through social media and whatnot, but this was when I was around 21, 22, and I had gotten a job working as a delivery driver for Amazon. I was making decent money, but I still asked my aunt for a little gift, and she gave me enough money that I could go purchase my very first wheel and pedals, which was the very affordable and the go-to for many people, the Logitech G920. It's a belt-driven wheel. For those that don't know, it gave force feedback. These games can give force feedback like a real car through the wheel. And it was driven by a belt, and it had some pedals that aren't the best, but they were good enough. And this was a fairly good setup. I had it on my desk, and I was using a Microsoft Surface Book to run these games along with my console. And so I had heard about iRacing, which is basically, whether we want to admit it or not, the world's premier version of online sim racing. There's other options. There's Le Mans, there's Gran Turismo 7, and people have their preferences, but iRacing is the golden standard in a lot of ways. And the way iRacing works is you don't necessarily need a wheel and pedals, but it is so simulated that you probably should. You're not going to get very far with a controller. And it connects you to people around the world. It has set start times for races. They give you cars and tracks, and you have to purchase some cars and tracks if you want to get up into the faster cars, but that's for another topic. And you race people from around the world. And it has these 2 parameters called I rating and safety rating. And safety rating is basically your ability to not crash the car or crash into other people. And I rating works very similar to like ranked lobbies almost. And so basically I rating is a number, and you start off around like 1,000 or something like that. And you race other people, and depending on their I rating, if they're more or less than you, you gain a certain amount of I rating in where you finish in the race. So if you finish in first and you have 1,000 I rating and you're racing a bunch of people who have 3,000 or 4,000, you'll gain like the maximum amount of I rating, which is like 160 or something like that, or 180 or something like that. And if you have 5,000 I rating, you race a bunch of 2,000 I rating guys, you won't gain much for winning. So as you can see, it's modeled to create very competitive racing per se. And so iRating is something that a lot of iRacers obsess over, but I had just gotten into it. And so, flash forward a couple years, a lot of things happened in my life, but I had settled in, moved in with my dad, and I finally had adult money. And so I had my friend help me build my first ever PC. So I had the ability to run iRacing at a higher resolution. And for those who are worried, you can run iRacing on a brick for 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 anything. And I built my first rig. And for those that don't know, a rig is a metal, or it should be metal. It is always metal. And but it has a seat, like a racing seat, like a car seat almost, that you put on it, and you can put your pedals in a certain position and your wheel in a certain position. They won't move. The rig is solid, and it's like you're in a real car almost when you're sat down. You have yourself a monitor. You position it in front of you, and you can. This makes playing games, even like Forza, really fun. You don't need to be a super nerd, but um, yeah, I had started to get into iRacing. I still had my old Logitech G920, but I had real money at this point, like I said, and I was fairly good at iRacing. I had around 4,000 I rating, which is fairly high, though it gets much higher. um, and the wheel was just old, and my pedals weren't perfect, and so I went ahead and spent good money. It was on sale. I bought a Logitech G Pro, which is a direct drive wheel. And the way that direct drive wheels are different than something like a belt driven wheel is it's an actual motor inside here. Well, I guess it is with a belt driven one, but it's a directly driven motor, and so it's very smooth, and it can give you the inputs it can give you very fine inputs. And the Logitech setup has a lot more features that is very worth diving into some other time if you're more into sim racing. But that being said, I finally had a really nice setup, and so I got really into sim racing. And I have around a 50% win percentage in ovals, and I'm always in the top split. And I'm around 6,000. I'm approaching 7,000 I rating. And for reference, on oval, there's different types of I rating. So for oval racing, there's its own. For road racing, when you're turning right and left, there's its own. There's even off-road racing, which has its own, and dirt oval racing, which has its own thing. And there's also rallycross. So there's a bunch of different things to get good at. But I'm primarily focused on the paved stuff. I do love dirt. I'm very good at it too. I like to be a very well-rounded person with my I rating. I mean, I'm around a 5,000, 6,000 road rating, and I have around I want to say a 35% win percentage on that. I went around 1 out of 3 races, and I'm always in the top split of that as well, at least with what I'm currently racing. I haven't bought into the Porsche Cup where all of the true pros live yet, but I have a feeling I'm going to. I'm going to go and try ahead and go professional with this, which leads me into really why I wanted to talk about sim racing at the end of the day. Sim racing is just a bridge between so many things, because as I said, I just talked about this big story of how I love motorsports, how I like racing video games because of motorsports, and sim racing is just a evolution of all that, you know. I had no offense to the people who love Destiny and playing Call of Duty, but it's the same thing as like being good at Rainbow Six Siege, or being, it is just very nerdy. It takes a lot to be good at. And it's a full sweat fest. And you race people from around the world. You get into real beefs with people who pull bad moves on you, and you make friends with people who want to race you well. And for those that don't know, there's some major proponents of sim racing. Max Verstappen, who you should hear of, F1 world champion, I believe 4-time. He is a huge proponent of sim racing, uses it as a hobby, has his own sim rig installed into his own jet, for Christ's sake. It's pretty crazy with Max, and he loves sim racing, and he even made his own team, a GT3 team, which is a form of racing of a type of car, very high level too. And he brought up sim racers to race in it who do very well and who have won a few events. And there's even sim racers who have made their way into NASCAR, who have made their way into IndyCar, and maybe not quite Formula One, because Formula One is elitist, to say the least. It requires money and time and effort and connections. But even Max Verstappen understands this. His dad was a Formula One driver, and that's why he loves sim racing, because the same skills that it takes to be good at that takes in real life. And so as I try and transition my own career alongside of what I'm doing with school, yeah, I'm gonna try and go professional with it. I'm gonna try and make money from it. I'm gonna try and turn it into a real life race car seat someday. I really would love to. And there's guys who have done this. And these sim racers are just amazing drivers. I can name a few of them: Alexander Spetz, James Baldwin, who's now currently working with Mercedes AMG F1. It's fairly wild world, and so I highly recommend jumping into it, even if it's just for fun, even if you just want to jump into iRacing to see. It teaches you really good skills, and it's very worth it. And I played Car X and some drifting simulators too, which is really fun, because when am I going to afford the ability to go and burn tires? So sim racing is just the coolest thing on the planet, and simulation driving really is to me personally. Because I'm a mountain bike racer at my heart, but there's no way to simulate that. Moving through nature and moving on your bike, it's way more simulatable in sim racing. Yeah, the car's not moving, and you have to pick up on the sound more. You have to use your visuals more, and you have to use your feel of the wheel and your feel of the pedals and your prediction of them. But this is something that only is, it might be expensive to some people, but it's so much more affordable than real life. Max Verstappen's rig might cost $25,000 to my $1,500 rig. I think it's even more than that, by the way, with him. But and his pedals have certain feedback in them, and everything else. Or you can go even crazier and get a motion rig. But simulation racing is important. Like Mercedes F1 and all of these F1 teams and IndyCar teams and NASCAR teams, they have they have these $100,000 to million plus to oh, you would be shocked at how much money they spend on them, that simulate simulate their race cars so that they can show up to the track with a setup, and they can train their drivers, they can train their engineers. They spend lots of money on this, and these drivers hone their skills, get better at their racecraft through sim racing. And so with sim racing, this has brought me to this point where, yes, I want to race cars, but I'm also in school for journalism. And so I'm going to end this with a few quotes. I was lucky enough to attend the Long Beach Grand Prix and back in April of this year with my professor Aaron Martinez from Rio Hondo, and it was just an awesome time. But I got to interview Marcus Ericsson, Christian Rasmussen, and Romain Grosjean, who all come from different walks of life. But to give you perspective, Romain Grosjean and Marcus Ericsson have driven Formula One cars for many years before they transitioned over to IndyCar racing, which is another form of open wheel where the wheels aren't covered, and they almost look like spaceships or airplanes to those who don't know. But these are two really notable drivers, and I got to just get some quick quotes on them on sim racing, and it shows that no matter whether you like it or not, this is a real thing. Through esports, through getting ready for racing, and through everything else. And Christian Rasmussen is also a very notable driver as well, not to discredit him. So I'm going to end it with these three quotes. But yeah, that's a lot about me, about how I came into driving, and, and how I came into sim racing. I could talk about it for hours, but this is only our first podcast. So I hope you really enjoyed my story about it. I hope you have a better understanding of what it is through my own story. And I hope it intrigues you. I hope you look it up. I hope you see how much someone like Max Verstappen is racing online and how many people have come up through it. And maybe that can bridge you into understanding the gap of opportunity that lies in our world. Maybe it seems like it's non-existent sometimes, but No, your connections and where you're born has a lot to do with your ability to go places in life. And there's a systematic oppression that we face. And a lot of these cars are funded, you know, there's race car drivers in the same thing. It's from IndyCar, who have parents who work in private equity, who make so much money you'd be just amazed, who fund over 75% of their children's ability to race. A lot of people want to talk about Lance Stroll, but he's no modern example. He's no exemption from how racing is. And Lance Stroll, if anyone doesn't know, his father owns the very Formula One team that he races for. Racing also is very reflective of our society and its makeup and whatnot. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that you should also get into NASCAR, because NASCAR has lots of diversity efforts. If you were to go look at a garage and you're going to go compare even NASCAR to IndyCar, NASCAR to Formula One, the garage is far more diverse. And it's getting there. It's going to take time. I can't wait to see way more women in motorsports. But sim racing even brings women into motorsports. I've met many women who are great drivers. Hell, they beat me, you know? They're great. And they deserve their shots at real life race cars, just like I feel like I do. And sim racing is a very cool tool because though, yes, people make money off of it, it takes the capitalistic definitions of life out of racing, whether that be gender or race or sexuality. All of those things don't matter when you're just behind a name on a computer screen. You have to show up and race and beat these people with real skill. You have to focus like crazy. You have to use the same skills you would in a race car. And you have to develop real life racecraft. And so if you want to look me up, I'm Calvin James on iRacing. I'll link to more after this. But yeah, I'll end with three quick 20-30 second interviews for you to consider. And I really hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I hope that you come to understand that racing is important in our world. And that sim racing is only exemplary of where we're moving. You know, tools like AI may be killing the planet, but sim racing is only making it better. So with that, I will leave you to my final interviews. Again, my name's Calvin James. I hope you really enjoyed my story today. This was made for El Paisano Media. I hope you guys all have a great week, great month, great year. And tune in to the Indy 500 here on May 24th. It is awesome.
No, I've not done much myself. I do have an esports team, REG Esports, has been doing amazing, but I kind of, as an owner, too busy to do it. No, this weekend, we have one day on the sim. We try to use it as much as we can, but we're limited in access.
I do a little bit of sim racing. Obviously, a lot of our preparations for the weekend is very sim-based with the GM Tech Center and their DILs there. In terms of my free time sim driving, I do a little bit, but not a whole lot. I honestly used to do more, but I kind of like toned it down a little.
I do some sim racing in the off season mainly.
Okay.
When the season starts, it's so busy with the racing and everything else. So usually during the season, I don't do much. But yeah, in the off season, I definitely do quite a bit. We do like usually one full day before every race in like the Honda simulator.